I'm Mahboubeh. I just finished my PhD in March from Osaka University, and I'm currently working part-time at Kansai University. Both of my MA and PhD at Osaka University, and both of them I looked at EMI. And today, based on the literature review of my research, over 5 or 6 years of research, I'm going to share with you, based on the time that we have, a brief literature review about EMI with a particular focus in Japan. Okay, about EMI or English medium instruction, there are so many different definitions, and as Dearden points out, and Macaro et al. Also, they repeated the same thing. There is no universally accepted definition of it yet. But I'm going to talk about the common definition today. Next definition here in Japan focuses on the content. It means that EMI refers to teaching academic content courses, such as, for example, chemistry or physics, in the medium of English. And it usually doesn't have any language teaching and learning objectives, although language learning might happen as a latent benefit, unconsciously in the classroom, of course. And Dearden, which is commonly being referred in the literature, defines that both EMI and ETPs, as Brian mentioned, full English degree programs, refer to the context of countries where English is not the L1 or the first language of the majority, which majority also has some issues with it, depending on how we are going to measure this majority. For example, in case of Japan, it might be easier to find out what the majority speak, what language they speak, but in case of some countries, it can be more difficult. In the literature, EMI mostly refers to courses or classes when the whole program is not being designed in the English medium. But when the whole program is being taught in the English medium, it is commonly referred to as ETPs, or English taught degree programs. There are some similar terms to EMI in the literature. These are some of them that I picked up here. The most common one is CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. And then the others, CBI is also being very famous, Content-Based Instruction. The latest one, CELFIL, kind of difficult, it's actually, I think, being developed by Hino, a professor from Osaka University, Content and English as a lingua franca integrated. He believed that we have so many different Englishes, for example, Japanese English, and these can be integrated into the EMI classrooms, into ETPs, and we don't need to focus on native English, for example, American English or British English. And he believed that using Japanese English can help the Japanese learners to get more involved in the EMI classrooms and have better performance. So all of them, they have dual focus on both language and content, more or less. But EMI is usually being referred to not having language objectives. And we have also some other terms, a lot. There are some of them most famous with focus on the language, EFL, EIL, and the others. This was pointed out in the previous section. I think today in other presentations also is going to be pointed out again. And we can see the rapid expansion of using English as an international lingua franca all over the world, especially in higher education sector. And Englishization of higher education is closely linked with globalization and internationalization. A recent study by Rose and McNeil shows that, also Shimauchi's recent study, English-speaking countries, and after that, non-English-speaking countries that mostly offer EMI courses and, more importantly, full-taught English degree programs have been most successful in internationalization of their higher education institutions, particularly in terms of university outputs and international rankings. This figure shows the language shares in total academic publications over the past 100 years. And as you can see, even before the start of globalization, English has become the dominant language being used in higher education and academic publications. Today I'm going to mostly talk about Europe and Asia, and with a particular focus in Japan. I picked up Europe because the first non-English universities that offered full-time English degree programs were in Europe in the 1980s. And it was at University of Maastricht, right, if I'm pronouncing it right, in 1925. And Bologna Declaration, and then following that Erasmus program, helped to facilitate the expansion of ETPs very, very rapidly, and also the student and faculty mobility throughout Europe. And Phillips in 2009 somehow exaggeratedly points out that internationalization has been defined as English medium instruction in the Bologna Declaration. As in the Bologna, the focus has been very, very much on the English, on ETPs. As you can see, ETPs in Europe has expanded very, very fast. By 2002, in Europe, there were 800 ETPs, and by 2008, more than 2,400 ETPs. And 1,000% increase between 2000 and 2008 happened mostly at the graduate level. The rationale was firstly to respond to the needs of the domestic students in the rapidly globalizing world, and then it shifted towards recruiting international students and marketization of higher education, as well as promoting the European higher education institutions, global competitiveness, and academic profiles. Much research attention in EMI has been on the Europe case because of the rapid expansion of ETPs in the Europe, especially in terms of negative outcomes and challenges. A major challenge in the Europe case has been pointed out as the role of English is in the academic American hegemony and English academic imperialism. Because it can put the position of other languages at risk because of its sudden development and sudden use of ETPs. Linguistic challenges has been pointed out as the most dominant kind of challenges. The quality of EMI ETPs because of linguistic limitations of students and or faculty members has been pointed out a lot. And a need for collaboration between EMI and ETPs instructors and language staff was pointed out as a way to overcome this challenge. As I'm going to talk about, this was a challenge in the case of Asia as well, and in Japan. Cultural challenges and structural challenges have been pointed out here in the case of Europe as well. For example, a need for intercultural training for both students and faculty because of the highly diversified classrooms due to ETPs and more mobile students, and structural challenges such as need for developing teaching materials and recruiting English-speaking instructors. In Asia, this trend started through a partner relationship with English-speaking countries, including the US, UK, and Australia. And gradually, they developed their own EMI and ETPs. The countries that used to be colonized before by English-speaking countries, such as Singapore and Malaysia, they adopted EMI faster than those that didn't have this experience, including Japan, Korea, and China, particularly because the widespread uses of English beforehand. In Asia also, similar to Europe case from the 1980s, starting with the leading universities in Japan, Korea, China, other ASEAN countries, they have increasingly expanding their EMI and ETPs provision. The rationales are very, very diverse, includes the recruitment of international students and building a better profile for higher education institutions. And also, as you know, English has become the working language of WTO as among others. So they have to use English more and more nowadays. In East Asia, these initiatives are predominantly government-led and being led by the government through different initiatives. For example, in the case of Japan, the recent initiative is TGU, or Top Global University Project. South Korea, China, and Japan, they have gone through similar EMI practices and similar rationales, mainly for the competitiveness of their higher education institutions. A shared challenge, which is similar to Europe, is the quality of EMI or ATPs, such as a lack of linguistic readiness of the students and instructors, and a lack of research on the actual practices of EMI and ATPs in relation to the government's policy strategies have been pointed out. Similar to this, in the case of Europe also, this has been pointed out, that EMI is exceeding very, very fast, but the research about the actual practices is lacking. In the case of China, by 2006, an average of 44 EMI courses per university was reported. And in terms of the number of international students, as you know, is growing very, very fast, the first one in Asia, and the government wants to increase the number by 2020. Similar approach has been pointed out in Japan and in South Korea. They want to increase the number of international students, and they use ETPs and EMI as a way to attract more students. In South Korea, one difference with China and Japan's case has been the rise of the ETPs, full degree English taught programs. At approximately 40% of Korean universities, study 2016 showed that. And the number of international students also rose very quickly from 11,000 in 2001 to 90,000 in 2012. And the government also has a plan to recruit more international students by 2023. A case of a university in 2006, Quest, a leading Korean university, raised some awareness about the sudden switch of the medium of instruction, all of the medium of instruction to English, pointed out that students and faculty might need more support. In 2006, this university switched all of the medium of instruction to ETPs, and then following that, 4 students committed suicide. It is difficult to link this suicide to the sudden adoption of ETPs, but the university decided on an ease in the ETPs requirements and the grade penalties. In case of Japan, as it was pointed out in the previous section, it started with the Meiji Ishin, Meiji Restoration, at Kaisei University, the current University of Tokyo. It was mainly first to serve the new Western community who came to Japan to help modernize Japan. And then after that, there was no EMI implementation because the medium of instruction switched to Japanese. The Japanese students that were sent abroad, they came back and they could take over the teaching positions. It was around 1946, by the end of World War II, after the US occupation, that EMI again started to being implemented. At some universities such as Sophia and International Christian University, this time again to serve the new Western community. And it was around the 1960s that EMI started to be used as exchange programs, such as in Waseda University, to serve the international students. In the 1990s, because of the globalization trend, more EMI and ETPs gradually became launched. And at the graduate level, 14 universities were launched. 1990s, graduate level ETPs rose to 28 universities. By 2006, EMI were used at approximately 1/3 of universities. And we have Global 30 after that being launched that helped launching more ETPs, especially at the undergraduate level. 2013, undergraduate level ETPs at approximately 20 universities. And after that, following that, we had these 2 Go Global Japan project and Teach You project that again helped facilitating this expansion. The number of ETPs you can see here in Japan as of May 1st, 2017. This is by just 2018 data. As you can see, they're mostly in engineering and at the graduate level. It seems that at the graduate level, implementing ETPs is more easier compared to undergraduate level because of the support of the supervisors and the nature of the graduate study. At the undergraduate level also we see a number of ETPs. And this table shows the changes in the number of ETPs and EMI from 2019 to 2015. 2019 was the year that G30 started. And as you can see, we have more EMI courses at the undergraduate level and more ETPs at the graduate level. So as we discussed, the EMI target has been Western community, international student, and then now the focus is mostly on the domestic student at Brown Sensei Show 2016. More EMI courses serve Japanese students rather than international students. In the Japanese higher education's highly diversified nature, we have so many different rationales and EMI ETPs implementation. This is based on a number of different studies, but this model is based on Shimauchi 2018 and 17, Dejima model and Crossroad and Global Citizen model. Dejima model is being implemented as a few elite universities, mostly national type, that receive most of government's funding, like for example TGU. And they use ETPs as ways to attract high quality international students, especially at the graduate level and STEM subjects, for the sake of rankings. Crossroads model kind of focus on both international students and Japanese students, and global citizen model is being implemented as in the majority of Japanese universities, mostly private, in order to attract more Japanese students, improve their English language proficiency, and then foster their global jinzai or global human resources character with more marketing approach.
No, you still have 3 minutes.
Okay, good. In terms of the challenges, as I pointed out, in the literature, it has the main focus has been on the challenges. In terms of Japan, based on Bradford's research, cultural and structural and linguistic challenges, I divided different researches being done on these categories. Cultural, the main one has been the isolation of international students, especially in the Dejima model, where international students are kind of segregated, isolated from the mainstream group of students which are Japanese. And then difficulty of integrating EMI into university culture. The third one, Japanese students' shyness when speaking English, even if they're fluent in English. I think we're all familiar with that. In the classroom, some of them you see you have students that are very fluent in English, but they're hesitant to try to speak in English. And even if they speak, they say, I'm sorry all the time. So it is suggested that we need to promote the intercultural skills of the educators and international students, and we need to work on the ways to integrate EMI ETPs into the university culture. In terms of linguistics, similar to the case of Asia and Europe, the linguistic limitations is an issue of the students, of the faculty, of the staff who are working with these students. And again, similar issue about relatively few international faculty members and difficulty of finding the staff who and faculty who can teach in the English. It is suggested that the usage of L1 of domestic students can be useful, especially in those classrooms that target mostly domestic students. It can be a little difficult in the mixed classes, where international students may be there and their Japanese language skills are limited. And then there is a need for carefully established English language standards for both instructors and students. Challenges about the structural type. As Bradford study 2016 divided them, these are two main: administrative, managerial, and institutional. As you can see, in the case of Japan, structural challenges are being referred a lot. Administrative and managerial. The internationalization of the curriculum resulted from diverse reasons, especially in the private universities that are targeting EMI ETPs for marketing purposes with an ad hoc approach. And inflexibility in making changes. I think we're all familiar with that inflexibility and the slow pace of change in Japanese universities. Secondly, non-specialist EMI ETPs, professors, lecturers who used to be English language instructors. And this was the main issue when EMI or ETPs started to be launched in the very first beginning, because there was no one who could teach these content-based classes. And who can teach these courses in English? The English teachers, they started. It really depends on I would say, the university context. So, for example, the leading universities, some very small private universities, they all vary a lot. And then a lack of full-time EMI specialist administrators, then non-established policies that we also covered before, at both governmental and institutional level, and lack of English assessment policies. And also a lack of formal and structural support for international students, with dominance of paternalism support because of a few number of international students looking after them like parents and providing supports on individual basis. At the institutional level means the way EMI is integrated into the university. Targeting EMI for marketing purposes with short-term goals without strategic planning, mostly at the private university, right? Small private universities. And paying too much attention to quantitative targets, on the numbers. When I was interviewing people for my PhD, I encountered this a lot. When I asked them, they all brought me a lot of statistics, numbers, we have this, we have that. But then when I asked them about the support, it was mainly that, what? And a lack of communication, again, similar to Europe and other Asian countries, between different stakeholders, and a lack of coordination. And a lack of intercultural mindset of some faculty and resistance toward the acceptance of EMI ETPs as beneficial strategies. I would say especially in humanities and social sciences, where professors usually tend to teach in the Japanese medium and they don't want to switch in English. And this is a summary of what I showed you. I just put it here to show a structure a bit more in the literature about the case of Japan. Yeah, and linguistic and cultural, they're very similar to the other contexts. So this is the final slide, some future research suggestions. So as we saw, a research focus has been on the challenges and mostly on the linguistic part of it, about the quality. We need to slow down and research the actual practices, the way for improvements. And there is a need to providing support for students and faculty members, coordination between different stakeholders, and established policies depending on the needs and resources. There is no one-size EMI or ETPs model for one university based on the needs and resources. There should be so many different coordinations for the possible improvements. And there were so many differences. I thought I put it here, but then because it would be very, the font would be very small, please just send me an email and I'll share it with you. Thank you so much.